Welcome back, everyone. I am so excited to have you here, parents, teachers, other caring adults in our neurodivergent kids' lives. Welcome. I'm really happy to have Sarah Collins here with me, who is the founder of Homeschool OT. And we're going to talk about communicating sensory needs, communicating what's happening. So helping our kids, our teens be able to tell us what is going on for them sensory wise and what is the need that they have. Sarah, will you start by introducing yourself? Let everybody know who you are and what you do, and then we'll jump into some sensory talk.
Absolutely. So my name is Sarah Collins. Like you said, I'm an occupational therapist and a homeschool mom. I have 3 kids, one who's about to graduate from our homeschool, so she will no longer obviously be homeschooled. I have my middle son who is 15, and he actually goes to the Philadelphia Hockey Academy. He's no longer homeschooled, and he is neurodivergent. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today comes from the blending of my background as an occupational therapist, my parenting, and recognizing what my child needs and how to communicate with him. So a lot of this comes from, both of those perspectives, right? And then I have a younger son bringing up the rear who's 10, and he's the last one here in our homeschool. So what I do now as part of Homeschool OT is I work with parents across the world on either setting up their homeschool programs if they have kiddos who are neurodivergent, or working with them within their homeschools to really cater to what their children need, how their children learn, how to help them do what they specifically need and want to do. 'Cause it's different for everybody. What you need to do, what I need to do are totally different. And how we get to that part or of being quote unquote successful in those tasks is different for everybody. So it's really working on how we can personalize education for our children.
And that's the key. That's absolutely the key. And we should be doing this for all kids. We should be teaching the individual, fostering the growth and the journey of figuring out who they are on an individual basis. But that's a whole nother soapbox that we get on in this conversation. But
world, it would be absolutely possible. And I totally get why it's not. But when it can be, that's where I come alongside of parents to do so.
Awesome. Let's start by, I think, defining what sensory processing is and how different sensory needs might show up for different kids.
In the world of occupational therapy, there's some really technical definitions, right? And then there's also some of like, I just need to know about what is going on with my kiddo. And different parents come at this differently. There are some that are like, I want to read all the research, and I totally understand that. And then there are some that are like, I just really want to help support my child in what they need and want to do. And I'm totally there for them both. For the purposes of today, let's talk about, how to support our kids in what they need and want to do. So basically, sensory processing is taking in all the information from around you through our senses. So that includes, the big 5 that ever windows from elementary school, what you see, what you touch, what you taste, all of those, right? Then there's also 3 more senses. There is proprioception, which is taking in information through your muscles and your joints through the proprioceptors. And it gives us information on how much force to use and where our body is in relationship to itself. So my prime example for this would be, if you're going to the front door, right, and you hear a knock at the door and it's the Amazon guys outside. Amazing. Fine. You have 2 boxes there, and you have ordered paper towels, and you have also ordered, I don't know, something really heavy. What? My prime example, and I can't come up really heavy right now. You've ordered bread. Oh, why? But you ordered a kettlebell. And they come in the same size box. So you go to pick one up, and you think it's the paper towels, but it's the kettlebell, right? And you go to lift it, and you're like, and it's confusing to your body for a second.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, it's kettlebell, fine. Your body adjusts, and you go back to lift it up appropriately. Or vice versa. You think it's going to be the kettlebell, and it's the paper towels, and you go to pick it up, and you throw them in the air. Again, your body is confused for a hot second, and then it takes in that information from the muscles, from the joints. We call organize it. And then you can be functional in your task, right? So that's the sense of proprioception. And in general, when you are engaged more with proprioception, it is the most calming sense, meaning it can calm your nervous system. So things like when you did pick up that kettlebell and then you realized what it was and then you organized that information, your body felt calmer. So that's that one, right? So you'll oftentimes hear people say, if you are feeling overwhelmed, do heavy work, right? That makes total sense. Even if you think I bumped my arm, what's the first thing you do? You grab it.
Grab it.
Because that sends these calming messages to your brain to help calm down. Another sense is the vestibular sense. And this is your sense of balance. It's in your inner ear, and it helps you to know where you are in space. So proprioception is where your body is in relationship to itself. Vestibular is where it is in relationship to the world. Am I sitting up straight? Am I falling down? Things like that. It is often the most alerting sense. So where proprioception can calm our body, vestibular usually elevates or makes us more alert, right? Think about a roller coaster, and you're going to get off of that. You're highly alert, spinning around. Then you stop and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't feel good, right? Highly alert. So for some kids who are really, sluggish in the morning or in the middle of the day, doesn't in the morning, if you're really sluggish, like getting up and getting moving, walking around, even, we do have some kids who are spinners. My son was one of these. He would sit in I would have one of these scooters, like the scooter boards, and you could put that kiddo on his knees and spin him, and he's and then he's ready to, right? But without that, he wasn't. So helps him to alert for, the things that he needs and wants to do. Finally, the last sense that we haven't mentioned, and I know I'm flying through these like crazy, but I want us to be able to talk about them and communicate. We need to have some basic definitions, right?
Of course.
So the last is interoception, which is more about what you are feeling internally. So if you think about in your belly, right, you could feel things like, I feel nauseous, I have cramps, I'm hungry, I have to go to the bathroom, right? All of these things can all be in the same general area, but you have to be able to decipher between them to be able to know what to do. So that internal sense of what's going on, and it's not just in your belly, and that's just my example, but of what is going on, that's where our self-awareness comes from. Same thing, I feel twittery, or I feel my heart's beating fast, to know that, and I feel, and then I can equate that to an emotion of anxious or to an emotion of excitement, right? But you have to be able to recognize what's going on internally to then express that externally to communicate.
And that awareness is the key. And teaching kids about sensory processing and sensory needs, because we don't do that. It's not part of parenting or educating. And so a lot of kids sort of just, they adapt, they learn it, whatever, it's sort of comes naturally. But then for a lot of our neurodivergent kids, there's more difficulty, I think, with that processing, that awareness, that communication. And so we struggle. And we, I think, often see behaviors, challenging behaviors, unwanted behaviors that are actually stemming from sensory struggles and are coming out in crazy ways that we don't always put that together, right? And so this communication can be so valuable in that way too. But also we want kids to understand their body and what they need and be able to give themselves what they need when they need it, right? So how do we build that awareness first? That's the first step, right, in this communication.
It's really interesting that interoception can be the basis for a lot of the being able to communicate. Because like you said, without this awareness, how do you even communicate what you got? You can't advocate for yourself when you're not aware. And how many times our general world are we actually telling kids to suppress what it is? It doesn't matter what you need. Sit down, and because we're doing whatever, we're reading or we're doing math, and it's time to sit down and 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, right? This stuff all the time. So what we need to be doing is giving our kids a language and helping them to understand that internal state. So there's a few different ways to do that. Number one is interoception and proprioception. We actually are finding are very linked. And this is what our most current research is showing. Most current research is saying. Things like, even if you imagine, yourself, if it's been raining outside and you've just been laying down on the couch or whatever all day and you're watching TV at the random day, that you're allowed to do that, which as a parent doesn't happen often. But so let's say you're doing that, and then all of a sudden you get up and you're like, oh my gosh, when's the last time I ate? Or when's the last time I've been to the bathroom? And I need to do all these things, right? You've totally, because you haven't moved, you totally have ignored these parts of your system. So if we're asking our kids to be still, then they're also most likely not as aware of what is going on internally. So we need to be building in movement as much as possible. And I totally get that is really difficult in a classroom environment where we've got 30 different kids and somebody needs to be moving and somebody needs to be sitting. And how do we build that in, right? Thankfully, for me, within the homeschool environment, that's way easier. We just build into our day of getting up and moving frequently. It's built into, for us, we cook in the morning while I'm reading loud. My son is able to move at that point. Now he does the hockey academy, but when he was home, that's what he was doing. And then after we do our morning time together where we're reading history and all of that, then we built in a chore time to our day. So that's a functional way of adding in this movement. So I used to joke and say we had the cleanest floorboards in all of America because that works for him. He would crawl and wipe a floorboard and crawl and wipe a floorboard. So he's getting all this proprioception, right? Functionally. Then we could go outside and, or we would do a little bit more math or whatever, and then he could go outside. So it's a lot easier in that way. Within a classroom setting, you have to really think about how can this happen? And sometimes that's flexible seating, being able to sit on a ball or sit on a tea stool, sit on a sit disc. I'm laughing because I'm pointing to mine where I sit on all the time. A bit of wobbling. So our kids, if we are building that awareness, then we can use language like, oh, I notice that it's easier for you to, focus on this math because you're moving some. Or, wow, I noticed once you got up and you moved around a little bit or you did push-ups or something like that, then it was easier for you to sit back down and you could look at me when we were talking. Whatever it is that with your specific kiddo that shows you when he's alert or in this, what we call the zone of optimal alertness, where you are really able to focus and get something accomplished, a task that is what is being asked of you.
Right.
If we can notice the parts of their body, like how they express that, whether it's their posture, whether it's eye contact, whether it's, their shoulders are all hunched up or they're more relaxed, or whether it's that they're able to look around at everybody else and, take in the sensory information with a smile on their face. Every kid's going to use their bodies to communicate this differently. If we can add language to that and really observe, then we're in essence teaching them to advocate for themselves.
Mm-hmm. And I used to do the movement with schoolwork for homework. My kid never just sat at a table and did work, not young anyway. He had a hot ball. He's a very sensory seeking kid. So he had a hot ball. He would bounce around in between the living room and the dining room. And I would call out, spelling words and he would practice spelling or whatever it was. Or we used more tactile things because he has dysgraphia and writing was difficult and definitely not preferred. So I had Play-Doh and alphabet cookie cutters and we would spell that way sometimes, or we would use dried pasta for math and, just trying to lean into what he needed to be able to focus. And sitting still, he was not able to do it. I have this video somewhere saved on a computer somewhere or something from years and years ago where he was trying to do his reading because, in public school, each grade has like a certain amount of reading every night, right? And he would really struggle to focus on the reading. And he was literally upside down on my bed with his feet on the wall doing this and reading. And it was like the only way he was going to read a whole page. Like, it's just what he needed.
Right? Because he was actually doing the things that he needed to do with the freedom to do so.
Mm-hmm.
There who have suppressed this so much they don't even know what they need. But you have worked with him enough that he knows that and given him the freedom to do so. So in that position, right, he's getting that proprioception through his hands and his feet because he's got them pushing, which again can calm the nervous system, but he's also upside down, which is more of that vestibular. So if you think about that, that's usually more alerting. So you're probably like, what, Sarah? Here's the thing is that with that alerting system, a lot of our kids have these very narrow thresholds. I was talking about this zone of optimal alertness. So some kids have a very wide zone of optimal alertness. They can sit there and they can, focus on their math for hours, right? They're quote unquote, and I hate saying this, but it's true in our system, they're quote unquote the good kids because they're easy, right? They are most likely neurotypical, but also they just know how to work in the system and their bodies are able to do so, right? For our kids who can't, they may have these very narrow thresholds. So your son, he needed some of that vestibular to stay alert. And then he also needed that proprioception to stay calm all at the same time, right? So he's both. And with that freedom to do so. We would also use a lot of tactile things. I had these Montessori letters and I would put them on one side of the room. And then he would get on that same scooter and pull his way over. I'd be like, grab the seat, whatever. He'd grab it, spin around a couple times, pull it back to the other, put down the seat, go get the A, and then come back. So it would take us more time, but he was using all of his body so that then he could focus on the actual spelling rather than focusing on just keeping his body still.
And they're communicating their needs, right? Through the behavior, like I didn't say, hey, go stand on your head and wiggle your legs and see if you can read. Like I would have thought of that myself, right? But it was him communicating, this is what I need without knowing what to say or yet really having that awareness, right? And I think so very often our kids show us what they need and we dismiss it. We think it's crazy. We think it can't work. We think that they need to do it differently. We have different ideas and we dismiss it. And we need to be more open, I think, to looking for that communication within different behavior.
Right. Or the environment doesn't allow for it, right? I mean, there are times for sure that, my son couldn't get on a scooter and move all around. I always think about when we would go to Thanksgiving at my in-laws' house. Now they have this glass coffee table. And every time we would actually do this preparation before we're going, like, you cannot come off the stairs and land in the glass coffee table because you are going to get hurt. And yes, they are your family. And yes, they love you. But they're not going to be happy if you break their coffee table. Like there are things where we just have to lay out the expectations before. But as we would do that, would say, okay, so what can we do to meet those needs? In essence, what are our spaces or how can I say yes to you? And we would have to prepare for this for quite a while before we would go and get there. And he could come up with ideas, but again, only because we've tried this over and over and over. He would often bring we used to put all of his stuffed animals in a beanbag chair. It was like a zip-up beanbag that you could put them all in there. And so he would always bring that. And there was a spot in their basement where he could put that and jump on it over and over and over. And that was something that we could and do, right? Yeah. He also is very calming for him to suck through a straw And so he would be like, I need my straw and I need my stuffy. And then we can go. Again, this is because we communicated about it for so long of like, this is going to be the no, but what are your yeses?
Yeah, I love that. I always try to think about how can I say yes to this? And it could be a quantified yes, that's okay. But yes is often better than a no for a lot of things because they really are telling us what they need, what they want, what works for them. Let's shift a little bit and talk about actual like language to communicate sensory needs. What can we teach our kids to be able to tell us what they need sometimes? How do we, we've talked about building that awareness. So this to me might be the next step.
I want to mention first about building some of that awareness. There is a curriculum by, her name is Kelly Mailer, and she is occupational therapist, and she has written a beautiful curriculum about interoception and how to help our children to do so or to build that sense in itself and begin to communicate about it. And she is fantastic. Her work is
Kelly's
fantastic.
amazing. Yep.
Yeah. I would recommend that and looking up some of her information just to help you to understand more what that interoception is. But once we have some of this awareness, we need to be able to, yes, talk about it, right? And just like I mentioned a little bit ago, things like if your body is, tense, you've got your shoulders up and your heart rate's going, it could mean lots of different things. And we as parents oftentimes will say what we think that means, like, oh, anxious, right? Well, maybe, but they also might just be really excited, and that can often look the same. Or they might be angry, right? So us giving this, I notice, I see, I feel, or I think you feel. So this is how I'm interpreting it, right? That can help to give our kids some ways to talk through it. So it's in essence separating out what you feel and what the emotion is. Like we in America, we think they're thinking, but really they're not.
Yeah.
What you're feeling and what that emotion is are two different things. So that just declarative language can be really helpful in that sense. And there are several books on how to use declarative language that can be really helpful. Unfortunately, off the top of my head, I cannot think of them right now, but I could.
Linda Murphy wrote like the declarative language book.
Declarative book. There you go. That's exactly what it's called. Now, there are a few systems within, the OT world that can be really helpful for families. One is, we call it How Does Your Engine Run, or the alert program. And what that one is it allows kids who need something more concrete to be able to talk about what they're feeling. So, for example, you could pick some 3 different things, and it's called How Does Your Engine Run because it started with, a choo-choo train, a speed train, and I forget what the other was. But you could do anything. It can be a Jaguar, Toyota Corolla, and like a pop-up car, right? So we're looking at 3 different ways. Do you feel like your body is flying or almost out of control, like you're here at the Jaguar level, right? Do you feel like you're just calm and you're able to, really focus? All right, we're a Toyota Corolla. Do you feel like you are really sluggish, like after Thanksgiving dinner? Then you're like a pop-up car, And you can use this with any. I've had families who've used it as animals, based on what their kids are, or what they're into. I've had one family who did Disney princesses because their daughter really loved Disney princesses. And so they did like Tinkerbell, like flittering around, right? And Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. So that's how they started to communicate about how, just generally, how does your body feel? Do you feel like Tinkerbell? Do you feel like Cinderella? And so they would have to do things like when you are getting ready to get started at the dinner table. All right, Cinderella probably needs to be at the dinner table because Sleeping Beauty is so much, putting your hand down or whatever. And Tinkerbell would have a really hard time sitting there. So what can we do to meet the demands of the environment at that time to help your body to get to Cinderella? Like we do not have to be at Cinderella all day long, every day. In fact, that's really possible for anybody. We are all sensory beings. We are all fluctuating throughout the day. But to be able to label it and then say, what do I need right now? This activity is demanding Cinderella, right? How can I help my body to get that? So that's another. There's zones of regulation, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. That a lot of schools use that. And they have, blue is more of, if we go back to the alert program, blue would equate to Sleeping Beauty in that time, where you're just, again, feeling really sluggish, right? The green is where you are in that zone of optimal alertness. Yellow would be more of your starting to feel like you might be overwhelmed. You're starting to feel where you are, coming out. For some of our kids, it's close to meltdown or breakdown time, right? And then red is when you are in that meltdown or breakdown time, or just totally overwhelmed, need to get away, all of that. So the struggle is that though it is easy because you can oftentimes just say, oh, I'm blue, I'm yellow, whatever. A lot of our schools don't take that second step as to, okay, great. They're like, I'm in green, awesome. I'm in blue, awesome. But there's nothing, or like you're in red, and like some people will be like, well, that's bad. But it's not. It's not bad. It's that we need to work through, right now, what do we need? Like, what does your environment demand, right? Or what do you need to be, quote unquote, successful in that activity? And how can we help your body and your nervous system to get to that point? So that second step is really, really key.
Yeah.
Okay, how can we support you to get to where you need to be? Sometimes you're just red and you need to move away. Right? And we need to say, like, yeah, you're red and you need to move away, and we're going to support you in that moment, right? Most likely it's not me talking to you. Oh my gosh, it looks like you're red. Wow, what are you going to do about this? That's probably not.
It's not really going to work at that moment. No. In
fact, when we used that program for a while with my son, and he loved Legos, and I would have a Lego man. I carried him with me everywhere. He was always in like my purse or whatever. And he had, how the Lego figures have that, I don't know, what the one thing on top of their head. I'm sure there's some name for it.
Yeah.
And so we had the blue, a green, a yellow, and a red little
brick. Yeah.
I guess like show it, or I'd be like, I think you're green right now. Whatever. Let's write a story or whatever we were gonna do. Or I think I'm noticing that your shoulders are really tight and you're starting to clench your fists. Looks like you're in this yellow zone. Let's whatever, But I didn't even have to. If he was in that red, I most of the time did not use any language. Literally handed it to him, and with something that I know usually works for him. Because if I was talking, oh, it looks like you're in red. Well, I'm noticing that your face is tight and your shoulders are up, and all that language from my mouth would have thrown him it would have been so much harder.
Worse.
At that point, that Lego figure is what he needed and what worked.
So not always verbal communication. Sometimes we need other things.
Because sometimes we need to hush.
Oh yeah, we talk way too much.
And let them be. And really that's where some of that advocacy comes in, because then we can observe and watch what they're going to do if we just have this basic language, and then they can begin to really calm down.
Tell us a little bit about your new children's book and how parents might be able to use it to foster more conversation around sensory.
Yeah, so this book actually it's called A Chameleon Tale. I'm going to hold it up here in case you're watching, or you could see it that way. So A Chameleon Tale, a colorful sensory story. And it started my really good friend, Jackie, who actually lived with her during graduate school. She edited all of my papers for OT school. And she has a kiddo very much like mine, like my Caleb that we've been talking about. And she was like, Sarah, where's the book that really illustrates this, that allows them to see and read, so see and hear, right? So we can add in this other sense of a story, where kids, because stories change lives, right? This is what can settle and sit in your heart. We're not going to
100%.
change, right? Through story, we're not going to talk about, your Disney princess. I mean, well, I guess you will, but it's something different. So within this book, at that point, we were like, I don't think there is one. And so we wrote it because she's an illustrator and a very beautiful illustrator. If you, again, can see these, like what she can do is like, she's just spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did is we took these chameleons who fluctuate throughout their day with their color on what's, again, going on interoceptively. It's allowing the internal to be externally seen or externally communicated without language. So they are all going on a journey to the Chameleon Cafe, which, how many times are we asking our families to go and do something and to go to a space that has certain social requirements. So you go into a restaurant, no, you can't be on your scooter and spinning around. Because your sensory needs are very important, but they're not more important than, grandpa who's sitting behind you who would be so disturbed by you doing that, right? So the book, the chameleons all change colors throughout, and Mama really helps to provide them with opportunities. So on their way, like one is running around, one is really worried, and so she's using this declarative language to help to prepare him for what's happening. She does some deep squeezes, right? So it builds an extra layer of like, oh, are you like Seth right now? Or, I'm seeing you could use the colors within this one too. My very favorite part is at the end, they get back and Mama's put them to bed, and Mama then changes color because, she's thinking about all the things that she's throughout the day and how much she's given to her own children, and she has to meet her own sensory needs. And this allows our kids to recognize, wow, like Mom also has needs. And so I've heard from many families who are talking about that is their best part of this book for them, because they're able to say to their own kids, I'm like Mama, or, I am teal right now. I need this, to communicate in that way where they're realizing like, oh, I'm not the only one who struggles and have some camaraderie even with their parents. And so I've been really blessed by hearing that from other families. So
I love it.
Gives a lot of language, also some ideas, and it allows your kids to see that this happens not just to them, but to everyone around them.
Yeah. And that's so important for not feeling so othered, for having a sense of belonging. And I really appreciate that you've created something that helps kids to feel seen, heard, and understood. It's what every human deserves, in my opinion.
And it was just highlighted by Disability Book Week, which is super exciting. And that's what they highlight books that do help all kinds of kids to feel heard, seen, and understood. Their work is very beautiful. And so I'm super excited to be a part of that.
Absolutely. Tell everybody where they can find you online, where they can find the book. And then, of course, I'll link that up in the show notes as well.
Amazing. So you can find this book on Amazon or any other, book retailers in that way. You can also request it at your library, which I've heard a lot of people are doing recently, and I absolutely love to hear that happening. You can find me at homeschoolot.com, or on any social media, it's homeschool_OT. And I'm happy to chat and to talk and just anything and everything to support families. Podcast is I think.
Yes.
Got that one in. You, Penny, just joined me on the OT is well. So we could link that one in the show notes too. You can hear us talk both ways.
Totally. We can definitely do that. And those show notes will be at parentingadhdandautism.com for everybody. And again, I'll have all of Sarah's links there and a link to the book as well, so that you can take advantage of learning more from her, helping your kids on their sensory journey, and all of the benefits that come with that awareness for us as parents too of our kids' needs and being able to communicate with them about that and helping them to eventually self-advocate, right? If they learned what they need and can communicate it, now they can advocate for what they need. So a beautiful arc to that, I think. And I appreciate you so much, Sarah, being here and giving us some of your time and your wisdom. And I'll see everybody next time. Take good care.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.